Mr. Wilson was already retired, but he was glad that he was able to get a job as a courier at such a respectable age. He needed the extra money now because his granddaughter June was growing up, and she constantly needed stuff to buy, and his daughter Isabella has been working very hard to pay for everything. And although Isabella asked him not to worry and rest in peace in his old age, Mr. Wilson only laughed. "Isabella, movement is life, and it's especially useful at my age, so don't worry about me." The elderly man came to his job as a courier a year ago. Although Mr. Wilson was in great physical shape, at first they were wary of the elderly applicant and took him on probation for a month. He gladly agreed, and during the probationary period, he was always on time, did his work well, and eventually was hired as a full-time employee. Mr. Wilson enjoyed his work because he always liked walking. There was plenty of time, so he never got tired. Mr. Wilson saw his boss only a couple of times, and he usually received his assignments through his secretary. The team was mostly female, and Mr. Wilson often heard how the women had discussed their boss. From them, he found out that the boss has a hot temper, and he became such after his divorce with his wife, who left him with a little daughter. Mr. Wilson tried not to listen so as not to load his head with unnecessary information, but he did not succeed, because as soon as he would come into the office, it immediately began. "Oh, the boss is upset today. I heard his little Bella got very sick. It seems like nothing serious, just a cold, but he's so worried about her. Did you hear that the boss hired a nanny from France for his daughter? Of course, the rich have their quirks, but I think it's too much. I heard she isn't a nanny at all. She's his girlfriend, and Bella doesn't seem to be getting along with her." After a few minutes, Mr. Wilson usually sighed, unable to listen to the endless stream of gossip, and advised the ladies to think more about their problems than to go over the details of other people's lives. They only snorted contemptuously in response and always stopped talking for a little, but then it was all over again. That day, the boss called Mr. Wilson to his office himself. "Here are these documents to be delivered by 3 o'clock for the meeting, and don't be late. It's very important." "Okay, I understand." Mr. Wilson nodded, glancing quickly at his watch. There was still plenty of time, but the elderly man decided to leave early. He took a shortcut through the park and was already halfway when he heard a child scream. Mr. Wilson looked around. A minute ago, he had seen a woman, apparently the girl's mother, chatting enthusiastically on the phone while her daughter came close to the railing of the bridge. Now the mother looked around perplexedly without seeing her. Suddenly, Mr. Wilson noticed the little girl floundering desperately in the water, but in a second, the wet jacket pulled her under the water. The man quickly undressed and jumped into the water. The cold burned him, and his breath caught, but he tried not to think about it. He had to dive several times before he could catch the girl. The man dragged her to the bank, where the people had already begun to gather. A siren was howling in the distance. The little girl coughed, came to herself, and looked at everyone with frightened eyes, but the woman who was with her just exclaimed indignantly, "What an obnoxious child! I can't turn my back for a second." "What kind of mother are you? It would have been better if you had hugged the child and calmed her down," said Mr. Wilson menacingly. "But I'm not her mother," calmly replied the woman. The child was taken by doctors. The woman also got into the ambulance. Mr. Wilson looked at his watch and realized that he was about to be late. He quickly got dressed and was about to leave, but a policeman stopped him to ask several questions. Mr. Wilson tried as hard as he could to explain that he had to rush to work, but the policeman insisted and assured him that it would not take him more than 15 minutes. In the end, Mr. Wilson arrived 15 minutes late for work. He ran into the office, wet and tired. The secretary sternly reprimanded him, stating that the documents were needed 10 minutes ago. Mr. Wilson waved his hand dolefully and walked out. But 5 minutes later, his phone rang. "Do you realize what you have done? You have let people down, and disgraced the honor of my company. I hope you understand that you are not working for us anymore," said the furious boss, and without letting Mr. Wilson say a word, he hung up. Mr. Wilson sighed heavily, thinking that the boss is right in some way, but he did not want to prove anything to him. Damon was furious. The documents really did need to be on time, and he hated it when such messes happen. The courier was not critically late, but Damon had already been on edge since the morning because of his conversation with Violet, and the courier's tardiness was just the last straw. Violet had been back from France for 2 months, and he was well aware that she was waiting for a proposal, but he was still hesitating. When they had parted for the last time, he had made it clear to her that they had no future. She was young and could very well meet another man who would take her to all the social parties, while he always has his daughter in the first place. But Violet convinced him that she loved children, and they would definitely become friends with Bella. And Damon gave up. He had hoped that Violet and Bella would find a common ground, but over time he noticed that nothing worked. And this morning's conversation finally convinced him of that. Violet, knowing he had to be at work today, had arranged to go shopping with her friends without even thinking to warn him about it. Damon got angry. "Violet, you know today is my big day. Why do you decide to go out with your girlfriends today?" Hearing the rebuke, Violet only said in surprise, "What does that have to do with me? Why do I have to spend all days with Bella?" "No, of course you shouldn't. But you could have warned, couldn't you?" "I'm sorry, dear. I had forgotten." Damon was annoyed because now he had to call the nanny and ask her to come over on her day off. He reminded Violet that she wanted to make friends with Bella, and today was just the right time. But the woman stood her ground. Realizing that arguing was useless, Damon left the room. Violet, meanwhile, called her mother and complained about Damon. "Can you imagine? He makes me to babysit with daughter." "Violet, you're wrong. Now you need to stay, and this way you'll show that family and his daughter are more important to you. And that, my dear, is a very big step toward marriage. Believe me, I have a lot of experience." Thinking about it, Violet realized that her mother was right, and hanging up the phone, she followed Damon. "I'm sorry, I guess I overreacted, but because you started talking to me in such an emphatic tone. Of course, I'll cancel the shopping, and by the way, Bella and I have wanted to go to the park for a long time." Damon looked at her surprised and then smiled. "I'm sorry too. I don't know what came over me." Of course, Violet didn't really want to go for a walk with the child, but she quickly consoled herself that she was doing it for her own good, and she could spend the time chatting with her friends on the phone. In the park, Bella asked her about something a few times, but Violet only brushed her off. "Oh, what else do you want? Take a walk and don't bother me. See, I'm on the phone." The phone call brought Damon out of his thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, and he anxiously picked up the phone. The person on the other end of the line informed him that his daughter had been taken to the children's hospital and that he should come right away. "Are you sure? What happened?" "My daughter is at home with my fiancé." "Your daughter almost drowned in the park pond and got hypothermia." Hearing this, Damon went into a daze and then rushed with all his might to the exit. He couldn't understand how this could have happened. He was sure it was a mistake, because otherwise Violet would have called him right away. Getting in the car, he dialed her number. "Violet, what happened to Bella?" he yelled into the phone. "Nothing important. She just got a little wet. And stop yelling at me!" Damon hung up the phone to prevent himself from breaking it in rage at Violet. At the hospital, he was relieved to see that Bella was okay. When she asked about the man who had saved her, Damon promised that he would definitely find him and thank him. "Bella, how did it happen that you fell into the water?" "Daddy, my keychain fell out of my hands, but it caught on the edge of the bridge and hung. I reached for it and couldn't hold on and fell." "Honey, why didn't you ask Violet to help you?" "I asked her," the girl replied sadly, "but she was on the phone all the time and told me to stay away from her." Damon's fingers clenched into fists. Meanwhile, the doctor came into the room and said he was letting her go home. At home, after leaving Bella with the babysitter, Damon came up to Violet and said, "Is there anything you want to tell me? For example, about how my daughter was drowning and some man was rescuing her while you were chatting on the phone." "But what could I do?" asked Violet nonchalantly. Damon sighed loudly for a little peace of mind and then pronounced clearly, "Pack your things and get out." Violet tried to say something else, but Damon gave her an hour to pack and left the house. Once in the car, he immediately went to the police and quickly found out the address of the man who had saved his daughter. The last name sounded familiar, but he did not pay much attention to it and drove to the address. The door was opened by a young, beautiful woman. Damon stared so intently that he even forgot for a moment why he had come. "Are you here to see my father?" "Oh, yes, I guess so. I'm looking for Mr. Wilson. I'm the father of that girl he saved today." "Oh, I see. Well, come on in. But he's got a fever." The woman went to her father's room, and a little girl of about 8 came out to meet Damon. The girl said hello, sighed sadly, and began to tell him that her grandfather was sick, and that he was fired from his job, and now he would not be able to buy her a bicycle. Hearing this, Damon suddenly realized why the man's last name seemed familiar to him. "Forgive me," Damon began at once. "I was wrong. I didn't know the circumstances. Please, as soon as you get better, come back to work with us. And, of course, thank you very much." Mr. Wilson smiled. Damon wanted to do something to thank the man, but he flatly refused. Damon was at a loss, but then Isabella entered the room and offered tea. At the table, Damon couldn't bring himself to take his eyes off Isabella and realized that he couldn't just leave like that, so he suddenly said, "Then may I buy a bicycle for June, at least? And you, Isabella, could help me pick one out. What do you say?" June clapped her hands excitedly, and Mr. Wilson smiled again. "I don't mind," Isabella said, and she blushed.